The Stone of Madness is a stealth action game from The Game Kitchen, the creators of Blasphemous. Set in the 18th century, you guide an imprisoned group of inmates in a monastery turned asylum in the Pyrenees Mountains through an investigation into the dark and macabre that's going on there. Led by Father Alfredo, your team must uncover the mystery behind a series of disappearances and bring those responsible to justice or escape.
Monastic life goes on with apparent normality behind these walls. But know this. Serious events are being concealed. Long ago, an order of His Majesty directed that a part of this monastery be dedicated to the care of the insane and the sick. Madness and despair, conveniently kept away from civilization's sight. But there is something else, something darker.
I suppose no review of the Stone of Madness could start off anywhere else but with the visuals. Taking directly from the paintings The Bewitched Man and Cutting the Stone, also known as the extraction of the Stone of Madness, the hand-drawn artwork gives the game a stunning classic animation look. The character animations run buttery smooth and all the models are very nicely detailed. Much like their last game Blasphemous, the art drips with the heavy religious overtones that colour every aspect of the game. The levels are richly detailed too. The monastery is a crumbling labyrinth with a network of corridors, tunnels and stairways that run through it like a warren. Each section is a dreary, oppressive and lush in equal measure, and while the stone rooms often tend to start blurring together in my mind, making it hard to remember locations and routes, the game also has no map. Each area has more than enough to distinguish itself from the rest. Light also plays a key role in this game, which I'll expand upon later, but the way the lighting is used throughout the levels is quite good and lends an extra layer to the visuals. If it's not the artwork that the Game Kitchen gets right, then it's the music, and the music is perfect. A neat little period track plays in the background, always helping to immerse the player into the setting and keep them there gently. From nice piano pieces to lovely winding string arrangements, the whole soundtrack is expertly weighted to the setting on screen. It's remarkable. The sound design is a bit more basic, but it does just as good a job as the music. The soundscape is quite muted, which gives each major action a little bit of extra impact due to the sound suddenly ramping up. The slamming of a cell door, the whack of a guard's baton, the sound of a gunshot, each carries real impact due to how the sound makes the action really stand out as something exceptional. Right, so the art, the music and the sound teams have all done their jobs well. How do the writers do? Well, not good, it has to be said. The premises is about as basic as it gets. You're all imprisoned unjustly. Now complete the task one of you was sent to do and get everyone out. There are two scenarios to play after the prologue, which offer two contrasting ways the story can go, but they're only differentiated by length. The entire story is pretty much delivered through admittedly excellent animated cutscenes or dialogue that's incredibly stilted because the characters are speaking for the benefit of the player, not to each other. Speaking of the characters, there should be some sort of crime to waste potential this plentiful. Each of them has such a compelling description that isn't fleshed out in the slightest, leaving so much behind. I'm not asking for hours of flashback on each of them, but if you're going to create characters this quirky and likeable, you're going to have to give some background. The longer scenario has you seek out a series of engravings which detail the building of the monastery and the gradual mental decay of one of its engineers, but other than flavour text, there's no meat to the story to get invested in. A real shame when you consider just how gorgeously it's all presented. The main gameplay loop is days split into day and night sections, each altering how you can progress through the levels. General exploration interactions are easier during the day, whereas accessing the forbidden areas is usually easier at night when there are fewer people around, but then you've also got the ghostly animals to contend with then too. At the end of every day cycle, you can either do some nighttime recon or return to your cell to rest up, recharge, craft and prepare for the next day. Each of your characters has a different set of skills, and figuring out which you need at any given time is essential to progressing through the game. The leader Alfredo can use his background as a priest to deliver guard distracting sermons, conduct exorcisms to eliminate ghosts, heal and even impersonate a priest, allowing him to walk through restricted areas without worry. Leonora serves as one half of the muscle, being the only character who can directly knock out or even kill guards and carry their bodies. She's also the team lockpick and can be upgraded with the ability to throw ropes to help reach other areas and even use guns. Eduardo is the other half of the muscle who can also knock people out with huge chain swings. He's the resident giant who can move huge boxes and planks to create new paths through the level. He also functions as the team's crafter. Agnes is the team witch with the ability to cast spells that range from putting out and starting fires, foreseeing the contents of any container, up to casting hexes on guards that trip them up if they're alerted, and summoning swarms of flies that can eat dead bodies. The group is then rounded out by Amelia, who functions as the scout. She can crawl through small tunnels and plant traps to distract or incapacitate guards, and she can pickpocket as well. But it's not only your character's strengths you'll have to manage, you'll also have to manage their fears and maintain their sanity levels. Alfredo can't be anywhere near a dead or unconscious body, Eduardo was afraid of the dark, Agnes is a thing about mirrors, Leonora is afraid of fire, and Amelia is terrified of the stone gargoyles that litter the monastery. Their sanity also takes a hit at the end of each day, as the mounting stress of incarceration takes its toll on their already fragile psyches. Ensuring that they're all adequately recovered before each day is a never-ending task you'll have to stay on top of. Should any of your character's sanity bottom out, they'll be bedridden until the next day, where they'll awake with a new issue for you to contend with, such as arthritis, meaning they can no longer sprint, or they develop a complex where they'll harm themselves if left next to the nuns for too long. It's through these barriers and others that the game attempts to add variety to the gameplay. Some of the characters can't read, so they're useless for any objectives involving reading, and Eduardo is mute, so he can't complete any tasks that involve talking. While these all seem restrictive, they serve to force the player to think creatively and come up with novel ideas for completing objectives. The game gives you little to no guidance on how to do this, and is remarkably open to allowing the player to come up with any solution to solve them. Sometimes the barriers can seem contrived though. Eduardo will lose his mind standing in a shady section of a garden outside on a sunny day, but can be left in a cupboard for hours on end without breaking a sweat. Alfredo is afraid of dead bodies, but only the ones that aren't plot specific. And then there's the soldiers, Mother Superior and Inquisitor NPCs that serve as the game elite mooks. They're somehow immune to a wide variety of your abilities, including unbelievably getting shot. The number of infractions too is quite bizarre, and what's allowed and what's not in the monastery seems equally contrived. A character can walk around with a dangerous flaming oil lamp, but not a plank of wood. The grounds are littered with boxes and containers, but trying to take a look at any of them will result in a beating. In fact, doing anything that's not just walking around will result in a beating. None of these issues contend with the main one being that the game seems unfinished with a large amount of bugs and glitches present. These ranged from minor graphical ones like screen transitions leaving all the previous scene's characters on screen, to game-breaking ones like mission objectives not triggering, or the particularly annoying one I had where Alfredo would remove his disguise at the start of every cutscene and not put it back on, meaning that triggering a cutscene in a room surrounded by guards meant getting caught the instant the cutscene ended. The gameplay also suffers from a bizarre lack of quality of life features that are common to the stealth genre. Devs clearly borrowed the stealth mechanics from Commandos and Shadow Tactics, but they've ignored the innovations those games use, such as a tactical pause or AI commands. I find the lack of the ability to queue up actions an inane one, as so many of the game's puzzles depend on multiple actions being performed one after another by different characters, so you have to switch to each character manually, reset the screen, and hope you can complete the next action in time. In conclusion, featuring a Goya-inspired art style, a Hieronymus Bosch-inspired story, and some Commandos-inspired stealth, The Stone of Madness will enthrall you just as much as those artists did and drive you as mad as the inmates are. It's about as many bugs as it has good ideas, and playing the game feels like walking a tightrope at times. When it works, it's a game you won't want to put down, but when it doesn't, it's an unplayable mess held together by the sheer will of the programmers. Once again, the Game Kitchen have managed to perfect all the elements surrounding the core of their game. The music, the artwork, I mean, these guys have a crazy talented art department, and the setting, but it's all let down by the faults. The controls are jerky, they often don't respond in time, which is a real issue in a game where timing matters this much. The storyline is non-existent, the characters aren't memorable, and the gameplay loop gets old fast. Wow, these guys love repetition. I still really liked what worked though. Enough to recommend this game to anybody, but just suggest that they keep their eyes on the patch list first.